All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a full agenda and I want to get through it in a timely manner. So again, welcome everybody officially to this after action review meeting for the exciting swallow-tailed gull that graced our shores, which was, as far as I'm aware, a one-day wonder. People only saw it on Wednesday, July 19th. It was a Wednesday, right? And has not been seen since then, or has not been reported since then. So you all saw this already, but just to kind of set the stage, there were a lot of different communications platforms that were used on the day that we were chasing after the gull and coordinating. And I've heard from a lot of different people responses, both positive and negative, about the way that worked. I thought, oh, well, you know, I work in the tech field. When we have a big incident, this is what we do. We have an after action review. We try and gather those lessons together in a useful way. So that's what I'm trying to do with this. The first item in the agenda is introductions. So I'm going to try and go pretty quickly through those who are in the Zoom meeting and ask you to unmute when I get to you and call your name and just briefly introduce yourself, where you're from, and like a very brief bit about your birding background. So, you know, who you are as a birder. Again, you can do it 10 words or less, that would be awesome. I don't think I will do 10 words or less because that's impossible for me apparently, but one sentence, we'll try and go quick. So I am John Callender. I am the current compiler for the Carpinteria Christmas count and the co-founder of Carpinteria Birdwatchers and the administrator of the Santa Barbara Birders Slack platform. Technically, it's called a workspace in Slack-ease, but an online messaging tool. I've been a birder most of my life, but have been more serious about it for 5 or 6 years, mostly in Santa Barbara County. So the next person I have in the participants list appears only as 18052. So I don't know who that is, but if you can.
That's Eunice. This is Eunice. I don't know why I'm 18052. I have no idea what that means. I'm trying to fiddle with my settings, but I don't think anything's going to appear. So hello, everyone. So that's probably all the time I get, right?
Yeah, we don't have to be harsh, you know, but yeah, that's great. That's perfect for introduction purposes. And I will just add that this is Eunice Schroeder, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, so Eunice, if anyone here is not aware, is the person who found the gull in the first place. So yeah, big round of applause, muted applause for Eunice. Okay, the next person.
I found it. I did not identify it, just to be clear.
Well, we will go over this all in great detail. So that's later in the agenda. Next, the next person on the participants list, as I see it, is just lowercase JC. I don't know who JC is.
Hey, John, it's Ken Perlman and then Judy Chen. So we're on her computer. And we are, hello, everyone. And we are birders from Goleta.
You're following the directions so well, I don't know what to say. Next is Glenn Kincaid.
Hi, Glenn Kincaid. I'm Santa Barbara birder and work on the Santa Barbara Christmas bird count.
And let's see, you know what? The names are moving around in my list. I probably should have looked more into the sorting. When we get to the end, if I haven't called you, you can just nominate yourselves. Hugh Ranson is the next on my list.
Hello. Yeah, I've lived in Santa Barbara since 1981 and I've been an active birder here ever since.
Excellent. Then Mark Brown is also on the list. So Mark, if you are speaking, you are muted. You would have to unmute yourself.
I'm Mark Brown. I'm from Santa Maria Birder.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Sophie Cameron.
Hi. I bird in Goleta, take a lot of pictures. Always really excited to see new county birds. Happy to be here.
Sue Cook. Now she says no mic or camera connected in chat. So Sue may not be able to join us verbally. All right, well, if Sue were here, she would be telling you that she is an avid birder. And she famously carries a camera larger than herself. So when you see her out there photographing, if the camera is bigger than the birder, it's probably Sue. Thomas Miko.
There we go. So I live in Claremont, Eastern LA County, very far from the ocean, birding for 32 years, and I am subscribed to 9 billion trillion email and other lists because it's the only way to find out in a timely manner when a rare bird shows up.
So it paid off for you in a big way because you were active in the discussion, I remember, on Wednesday.
And I was lucky that I drove for my job that day because some days like today, I take the train. So if I had been on the train that day, I would have never seen the bird.
Okay, well, I think that is everyone, although with the list resorting itself, Steve Polo.
Steve Caldwell, live in Mission Canyon since '93 when I started birding a couple of years ago. And I love tech stuff and equipment. So I'm kind of the tech birding intersection interests.
Excellent. And famously, last year you were at the top of the eBird rankings for Santa Barbara County for your county year list, which I know because I tried to pass you most of the year and was unable to do so.
And a rousing time was had by all.
It was a lot of fun. Okay, so I think that's it for introductions. Did I miss anybody? If you're here and you didn't get asked to introduce yourself, please unmute and do so now. Not hearing anyone, I will move on. So I want to talk about the purpose of the meeting, but actually let me start by pointing to the agenda. So I'm going to share my screen, and if this works correctly, this is how I will do it. Okay. So if that worked, you can see my blog post here from carpbirdwatchers.org. Thumbs up if you see that. Can you all see that? Excellent. Okay, so this is the webpage at carpbirdwatchers.org where I talked about this meeting. The agenda is there. Some goals for the meeting are there. There is a link to the YouTube live stream, which is running now and will be archived there. So just as a reminder, if you didn't already realize, whatever you say is going out in the YouTube live stream and will be part of this record. And hopefully you'll be okay with that because it would be a pain to have to go try to edit the remarks because somebody didn't want to be associated with their remarks. So please continue to participate, but do so in the knowledge that you're part of the public record of the meeting. Okay, so the meeting agenda. I want to make sure we're all clear on this. So introductions we've already done. Purpose of the meeting, we're even ahead of schedule, that's great. Purpose of the meeting, I wanted to talk about for about 5 minutes. Timeline of events of the day. I kind of wanted to go through the sequence of communications in the different channels, just so we have a factual basis for the discussion. So not talking about, things that necessarily made us happy or sad about those communications during this phase. We're just kind of going through them, hopefully quickly. This is what happened on the day. Then a session to talk about what worked well, so we can be positive and celebrate the things that were good. And then what could have worked better, because I want this to be an honest discussion of what could have been done better. And, since the event, actually during the event, I received a lot of feedback from people who had both positive and less positive things to say about how things work. So I really wanted to have a chance to get that information out there. That is the part of the agenda where we will get into that in a detailed way. And then finally, recommended improvements. So what do we want to do about these things so we can do a better job next time? And finally, action items, just like, who specifically is doing what afterwards. So are there any questions about the agenda or feedback, things you think are missing that shouldn't be there, or things that are missing that should be there, or things that are there that shouldn't be there?
Well, I may be wrong, but it seems to me you could go through the timeline quicker than that, and we could have more time for discussion then.
All right, I will take that as a challenge. And you are my monitor. If you feel I am dawdling, I am empowering you to butt in and tell me I'm going too slow. Okay, and then one other thing I did want to touch on are the goals of the meeting. And I posted this in the invitation, and you've probably seen it already, since most of you, I think, received my email setting this up. But these are the goals that I am trying to, moderate this meeting for. It should be open and honest, so participants feel safe discussing both successes and failures. It should be focused on learning. So the goal is not to blame people, but to learn and improve. It should be structured in the sense that we talk about, what the ideal version of this event would have been, what the actual event was, and why there was a difference, and how we can use that to do a better job next time. It should be inclusive, so everybody who wants to should get a chance to give their feedback. I'm not, trying to cherry pick the input. I want all the input. And again, you've seen the agenda. For the appropriate place in the agenda, I really want you to spout off and give me your opinions. And timely, it should happen soon after the event, which I think, we're a little more than a week out, but that's about as close as we could do. So I think that's fine. So any input, feedback, questions, reservations about these goals? This is the time allotted to complain if you think this is not the right way to do this. Yeah, I guess the people who felt this was not the right way to do this didn't join, which is a very efficient way to communicate that, or people just were busy, they had things to do. Anyway, those who are here are on board, so that makes me hopeful we're going to have a good meeting here. Okay. Purpose of the meeting. Excuse me. Should mute before I do that next time. Timeline of events of the day. And I meant to load this in advance, and I failed to do that. So apologies for this short delay. Okay, so are you seeing the timeline? You seeing a picture of the gull? Excellent. Okay, so I did this using a tool called Timeline.js. I was surprised at how well it worked. I created a spreadsheet, grabbed a bunch of data out of the stuff. Doesn't matter how I did it. Steve will be interested in how I did it. After the meeting, we can discuss how I did it. But this is basically going through all the communications, well, most of the communications on the day. I got a little lazy. I didn't put every single thing in here, but I tried to get most of the communications and all the significant communications. And they're arranged in 4 rows. So from top to bottom, these are when communications about the gull first appeared in each channel. So the first communications were in Slack. Then they eventually propagated to the SBCO birding email list, and then to the WhatsApp group, which I think most of you are already familiar with, but if you're not, it is a group messaging app specifically set up in Santa Barbara County. This is the SBA Rare Bird Alert, I think, WhatsApp group, specifically for this kind of situation. And then finally, the CalBirds mailing list, which is a statewide version of the SBCO birding email list. It's an email list. You all know what it is. Okay, so at 11:44 on Wednesday, July 19th, Eunice Schroeder, who's in the meeting, yay, Eunice, posted this photo along with some other photos into the Slack workspace in the Tricky Bird ID channel. And Eunice, are you, if you're not, can you unmute? Because I'd be interested in asking you just for a little more detail, if you can offer it, like on the day, what was your experience and what led you to post the information the way you did? And can you just fill in a little of that detail?
Sure. I saw the bird. I saw an unusual bird. I puzzled over it for quite a while. I'm a newer birder, obviously, so I'm not too confident of my skills, but I knew this was I tried to figure out what it was. I looked through all the field guides I could.
And you were hampered by the fact that this bird is not in a lot of the North American field guides.
Right. So I discovered that. I honestly feel like I caused a lot of problems that day. Maybe this is not what we're supposed to be doing in this meeting, but I wanted to try to, I contacted a local birder. And then I was waiting, I sent them pictures, blah, blah, blah. I was waiting for them to respond. And then I came home and wanted to look in print field guides. And I did that. And so time went by. So that's, I feel that that was a problem with the day. And that was kind of my responsibility for that.
So Eunice,
sure.
I very much appreciate you sharing that, but that's later in the agenda. That's what we talk about, what didn't go so well. I just want the facts here. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to go fast so Steve doesn't give me the stink eye for taking too long.
Okay. So how can I help right now?
You saw the bird, I think around 9:30, is that right?
Yeah, I think between 9 and 9:30 was when I was there. Yeah.
Okay, and by the time everything kind of worked its way through, when you actually posted it to the Slack group, that was at 11:44. And then all heck broke loose. So
right.
11:45, you added another photo. 11:45, Wes Fritz asked if the bird was still there, which was, the first question on everybody's mind when they saw these photos. At 11:46, so 2 minutes after the first photo, Alex identified the bird, which was very helpful for those of us who don't have it in our field guide. And I'm summarizing. If you want to see the actual text of these messages, you can join the Slack group and go read them in detail. But he commended you on your find, which I think is, again, a sentiment that all of us share. I chimed in to say, so where exactly is this? Because I was about to jump in my car and head up to look for it. And you said, well, the East End, but this was around 9 a.m. So you clarified that. It was with a flock of Western gulls. And I just wanted to be sure before I drove off to the wrong place, this was Goleta Beach Park. You confirmed yes. And then Wes reiterated, when you left, was the bird still there? Which again is a key piece of information, because if it had left, he was going to look, other places. If it was still there, that made that, ground zero for the search. So 11:50, this is 6 minutes after the initial posting of the photos. I said, I'm driving from Carp. I actually was not in my car yet, but stretched that I was on my way to my car. But just asked, could people post this in the WhatsApp group and the mailing list? And that was me thinking, like, not everybody follows Slack. We are a subset of the Santa Barbara birding community, and for something like this, we very much wanted to get the information out there. Eunice, you responded, the bird was there when I left. It didn't fly away while you were there. 11:51, so Glenn, yay Glenn, hero, the second hero of the, well, they're all heroes, we're all heroes here, but second big hero as I'm going through this timeline. So you posted to the SBCO birding email list at 11:51. So we're, what is that, 7 minutes after the initial posting period, which I think is pretty good. You posted to the mailing list. You then replied in Slack that you had done SBCO birding and you were working on WhatsApp. Wes said he was leaving in a few minutes. And then Glenn posted to the WhatsApp at 11:52. So what's that, 8 minutes? 8 minutes? No, 44, yeah, 8 minutes out from the initial report. Jeremy then, 11 minutes after the initial photos going up, was there at the beach with Alex looking for the bird and said, yeah, it's not where Eunice had it. So that was good info to get that quickly. And that's going on the WhatsApp group, which again, really is the purpose of the WhatsApp group, is for this kind of communication. So it was being used for that purpose. Then Eunice responded in the mailing list, in the SBCO birding list, giving a link to your eBird checklist, which had the photos, which was, again, very useful because people wanted to see the pictures before they pulled the trigger on whether they're going to drop what they were doing and go look for this bird. Alex reports back to Slack that it was not there and that he and Jeremy were splitting up to check Campus Point and Devereaux Slough. I mentioned someone should check the Santa Barbara Harbor area. So already, the local community is kicking into action like, it's not there. Where could it be? So we're sort of divvying up the terrain and spreading out. Sophie's first appearance, and again, I was very impressed with the zeal you showed. Like, you were willing to go up to Ocean Beach Park. You're going to drive north, hit all the beaches along the way on the south coast, and then just keep going on a theory that the bird might have kept going. So that's 12:17. So we're about, a little more than a half hour after the initial report. Hugh, and this is the first report to the Cal Birds email list. So Hugh, you're in the meeting. I'm curious, did you go through any kind of vetting process? Did you talk to anybody about whether it was appropriate to post this to Cal Birds, or did you just, decide on your own because it was such a significant bird?
Oh, I knew that everybody in California would want to know about this if if they were at all interested in rare birds. So I didn't have any doubt that that's what should be done.
Well, I'm glad you did it. Tom, who's also in the meeting. So you sent a post to both Cal Birds and SBCO birding email list, asking if the bird was still there. Again, the first question on everybody's mind when they hear about this is, okay, you saw it there. Is it still there? So there's your message showing up. Yeah, and go ahead.
So, no, just that there were, like I said earlier, the only way I can know what's going on in the world is to subscribe to 10,000 different email lists. Yeah. And I didn't even realize that some of this information was being shared on CalBirds. Right. I thought that I was actually the first person spreading it out to the wider California birding community. Only afterwards, while scrolling through a bunch of different emails, from different lists, mostly unrelated to this gull or your county, that I discovered, oh, they already posted. Okay.
And that's a recurring theme. Like that shows up as I go through these messages. You know, it was a very chaotic day. You know, there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of time pressure. People were trying to find the bird, then they were trying to get on the bird. And, you know, communications was sometimes, you know, a distant second or third priority to getting to the bird and seeing the bird. So very understandable. Let's see, Christopher Taylor, again, following up in the SPCO birding email list, has not been seen at Goleta Beach since 9 a.m. So, you know, making it clear to you and anyone else following on SPCO birding, if that was the case. Thomas Turner giving a negative report on Slack that he had checked Campus Point and the UCSB Lagoon. This is what, 12/21. So again, these reports are coming in pretty fast here. Mike Carell Feichner, I'm not sure that's the way to pronounce the name, but he reposted Eunice's SPCO birding email message with her eBird URL to CalBirds. So again, people on CalBirds could then click through and see the photos. Whoops, I skipped one. Then Linda Blue posted on Slack, not at the Goleta sewage ponds, going to Haskell's Beach. Yeah, okay. Noah Gaines suggested checking more Mesa's beach. Jeremy Cohen mentioned that Hugh was heading that way the last they saw him. So, and this is in Slack. So again, you can kind of see here, you know, this is going to be something that comes up later when we talk about what worked well, what didn't work well. There are these parallel channels of communication, and not everybody is seeing everything in all channels. So Nick in the mailing list mentions that Paul Lehman called and suggested checking rocky shores and beaches. This is at 12:33, excuse me, 12:35. Adrian O'Loughlin in Slack at 12:43 saying Sue and he are going to check Sands Beach and the Devereaux Slough mouth, which those of us who know what happened can go, ooh, potentially getting warmer there. Like we didn't know at the time, but that was actually a really good spot for him to be looking. Brad Hacker posts to CalBirds at 12:47, not refound. Thomas Turner on the SPCO birding mailing list mentions that people are coordinating on Slack for the search. He sort of summarized some places that it had negative reports and mentioned someone should check Santa Barbara Harbor. So to me, this was an interesting example where people are recognizing there is this fragmentation of the communications, and they're trying to fill in those gaps a little bit by reposting things from one channel to another channel. Brad Hacker in Slack says he's headed towards the beaches west of town, getting close to 1 o'clock, but El Capitan, Refugio, Gaviota. Jeremy says no bird at the Devereaux Slough mouth, which is unfortunate. Like, with the benefit of hindsight, it might have been around there somewhere, but there's a lot of area there and you don't have access to all of it with the snowy plover exclusion zone there. So it's quite possible the bird was out of sight, or it could have been somewhere else. Sophie mentioned not currently at El Capitan, lots of Heermans though. Brad asks if she checked the east end of the beach. Sophie said yes, she did. Lori Gaskin then joins in Slack and says she's just getting caught up. She's heading to basically the harbor area. There's going to be a bunch of messages from Lori over the next hour as she checks all the different spots around Santa Barbara Harbor. Wes Ritz talks about he's working his way south, gives some feedback about the gull. It's nocturnal, likes to chill during the day. Negative at Gaviota and Refugio, heading to El Capitan, suggests the Goleta Pier. Hugh on WhatsApp, and now that the WhatsApp group starts to really kind of kick into gear here as people share a lot there. Hugh said he was checking more Mesa, asked if anyone was checking the harbor. Glenn said Lori Gaskin was heading that way. Lori says, yep, she's headed to the harbor now. So Lori is clearly monitoring and responding in multiple channels at once, which I again find impressive. So Linus Blomqvist posted in the SPCO birding email list a sign up link for Slack. And we can talk about this later. Again, I heard some criticism from some folks. They felt this was not an appropriate thing to do, bringing out of the area birders into the Slack resource. We'll talk about it later. At the time, I thought, oh, what a good idea, because we have this information in Slack, and particularly avid birders coming from out of the area want to see that and see what's going on. The Slack sign up links expire after a certain amount of time, so you can't just publish one link. You have to kind of republish it in order for people to be able to continue to sign up. So he did that. Pete Schneekloth mentions checking Refugio and El Capitan. This is on the WhatsApp group. Sophie in Slack said she and Ali are expediting to Ocean Park. So Sophie, you probably covered more terrain than anybody else in this search that day, because you went all the way out to Ocean Park and then all the way back, because I saw you when you arrived at the beach where the gull actually was. Hugh asking if anyone's been to campus in Coal Oil Point. This is on the WhatsApp group. Sophie mentions, yes, she checked there thoroughly with no luck. So it's, again, with the benefit of hindsight, this is where the bird ends up being found. So it's really, I'm happy as I go through this. It's like exciting to see people kind of zeroing in on it. But again, people did check there and they didn't see the bird, and there was a lot of places it could have been. Brad mentions back in Slack that yes, Jesse Altstadt had checked the Goleta Pier in response to the earlier question from Wes. Curtis Morant shows up in the WhatsApp group, suggests the bird's probably sleeping now and not on the beach. Offshore piers and rocks would be better. Could reappear on the beach at the end of the day, which basically what it did. Sophie asks in Slack, anyone checking the Santa Barbara Harbor and breakwater? Lori says, not at the Mission Creek outflow, and now she's working her way west towards the breakwater. I mentioned that I just checked the Goleta Sanitary District plant with Jesse Altstadt, not there. So this one's not paraphrased. This is what Glenn actually said in Slack. When was the last time this many folks were looking in this many places for only one bird? Tom Turner said, yeah, no one will be able to say we didn't do our due diligence. So, yeah. There's always things you can criticize, it turns out, but we certainly put in a lot of effort. Whether it was the most, efficient application of that effort is what we can talk about. Tom Turner mentions maybe scoping the offshore structure at Elwood, the old like an old oil platform, right, that the cormorants nest on. Maybe it's too far away. Sophie says she checks that, but yeah, pretty far away. Okay, so we're 118 now, and there's kind of a gap. So, I think people are slowing down. They're checking the same places. They're not seeing the bird. There's nothing really new to report. And then this, again, in hindsight, very significant communication. Hugh Ranson passes on at 1:52. Betsy Moles just called me. She had a black-headed gull in a flock of gulls at the mouth of Devereaux Slough at 11:45. So, I don't want to take a lot of time, but Hugh, again, you get a gold star for passing this on, because I think that was, as it turns out, very, very important information. And we're all spread out. We're looking in all these different places. We don't know. Some of us have given up and gone back to work, what I was doing at this point. But that turns out to have been a really important fact. Let's see. And you said, please post if you've looked at the slough mouth. So this is happening on WhatsApp, right? Which again is the official channel for this kind of stuff to be communicated about. Jeremy says, yeah, I checked with Adrian O'Loughlin and Sue Cook about 45 minutes ago. We turned up nothing. Lori continues to check around the harbor. 1:53, another gap. And then Hugh says 2:17, just at slough mouth, gulls, but not the one. So Hugh, you actually went to the mouth of Devereaux Slough based on the Betsy Moles report?
I did. Yeah. Nothing.
I realize you can't say, like, you obviously gave it your best effort, but I'm curious, what is your sense? Do you think the bird was there and you just didn't see it? Or do you think it wasn't there, like you saw it was there?
The gulls were up and flying around and coming landing again, and it wasn't there. My guess, it was out on the ocean.
Yeah, which they do, right? They're a pelagic species. Okay, so then what are we at? 2:26. Anyone check the Bacara area? It's like, yeah, where do gulls hang out? We might not have checked. Alex says he thinks the blues were headed there. Linda Blue chimes in, yep, we checked Bacara and it wasn't there. 2:36. So Lori's continuing to sift through the various spots the gulls might be at the harbor. All of them negative. Steve Hovey at 2:53, checked Haskell's Beach, negative. And then this very interesting point in the timeline. So 3:11 p.m. So Brad Hines posts to the mailing list, the SPCO birding mailing list, talks about speculating about, well, grunion runs are happening, or maybe there's squid, maybe that's what's attracting the gull. You know, like the search has kind of gone cold, so we're kind of, you know, devolving into just sort of, you know, chatting about the bird. But at that same time in Slack, Cody Watch, is that how you pronounce his name? I'm not sure. Chimes in and says, I'm with Lynn Scarlett at Sands Beach, and the gull is here at the mouth of Devereux Slough. So that was very exciting news. That photo is the one I took later when I got there. But so that's 3/11. So that's a very important time in this timeline, right? Because we have refound the bird. We're on the bird. You know, there's probably, I don't know, a lot of birders who are very interested in this information. They're very interested in how this information propagates. So she will be here. I assume Lynn, who's talking about, will be here until the gull flies off. Tom Turner. So 2 minutes later, he posts this to the WhatsApp group, the SPCO birding, excuse me, the SBA Rare Bird Alert WhatsApp group, that the bird is at the mouth of Devereux Slough right now, reported on Slack by Cody. So what, 6 minutes after that, Dave Compton says, what channel on Slack? Rebecca Coulter chimes in the Tricky Bird ID channel. And Dave says, seems like a weird place for it, which, yeah, I will cop to that. It is true. And Rebecca says, no. So Dave comes into that, or excuse me, so Hugh in the WhatsApp group says, is anyone on site, right? Just kind of confirming who's there, who's on the bird. Jeremy says, yeah, I'm on site watching it. He gives the geographic coordinates so people know exactly where it is. Dave shows up in Slack and says, look, please put additional updates on the WhatsApp group or on SPCO birding, because not, you know, everybody looks here in the Slack group for this kind of information, which I think is a, you know, very good point for him to make. Like this very significant piece of information surfaced on Slack. We want to get it to these other places. So again, so this is 14 minutes, right? 25, yeah. So 14 minutes after Cody's posting it to Slack. But again, within 2 minutes, it was on the WhatsApp group. Alex then reposts to Cal Birds, right, at 3:29. So the bird has been refound. It's the mouth of Devereux Slough, gives the geographic coordinates. A bunch of people are on site watching it as of 3:30 p.m. And then Glenn, responds to Dave's question, why is it in Tricky Bird ID? So you respond in WhatsApp, you say, because it was a request for ID help as part of first unit. That's why it's in that group in Slack. Wim, following up on Dave's comment in Slack at 3:32, says, yeah, and reposted to Cal Birds as well. So, you know, he did not know, obviously, at that point, that 3 minutes earlier, Alex had done just that, right? It had just been already been posted to there. And Alex responds, like, I just sent an update to Cal Birds. And then 3:35. So Christopher Taylor posts to the SPCO birding email list, reposting Alex's post from 3:29 on Cal Birds. So this is the first that the rediscovery of the bird has been posted to the mailing list. And, you know, this is at 3:35. It's 24 minutes later, which is, you know, probably more than is ideal, but we will talk about that later. But it is, you know, it was posted 24 minutes later. Wim kind of says, yeah, it's been refound in Quillow Point Reserve on the Cal Birds list, probably not seeing that Alex had already put that information in. And this is kind of, again, reading over this after the fact, it's got this whole dramatic arc, and I feel so bad for Florence at this point. So at 3:56, Florence shows up and she's making a comment about something else entirely. And, you know, you can kind of, again, this is not, I shouldn't be focusing on it, but you can kind of map, you know, how Florence goes through her mailing list, because you see her kind of going in chronological order, you know, through the list and not seeing the stuff until doesn't realize there's more recent information. So you have to read it backwards, which you probably will do now. Tom Turner says the bird is still hanging around at 4 p.m. Still present, not moving around. Shizi Yusuf, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she's coming up from LA and she's, you know, very interested. She went into the Slack group, presumably using Linus's link, and asked about, you know, the status of the bird. Alex responded, gave the location. This again is one of my photos. I just threw in here because it happens to be at right about the time I took the photo. So I was on site looking at the bird at this time. Shazzy says thanks. Florence, 411. She's reading the discussion, this long chain of emails talking about searching for the bird. She's like, "Oh, did you guys check the Goleta sewage plant?" It's like, "No, Florence, get to the bottom of the messages." Dawn posts SBCO birding at 427. The bird is still there. Mike Bush arriving from San Luis Obispo County, asking for updates in Slack. Greg Sater, 434, bird is still there in Slack. Pete Schneekloff in WhatsApp, bird still there at 434. I'm not sure if that's him. That's probably him reporting from the site as opposed to just reposting what Greg had said. Dawn mentions that she emailed the SBCO birding list with the updated info, I guess. Oh, that's her update back here several minutes earlier. Mike Bush at 743, bird is still present with many observers. I posted in the Slack thinking, there are some out, like I saw Shezi, and I thought, there's some out of the area birders here. So I posted a link to the birdinghotspots.org entry for that spot to kind of give them some guidance on where to park and how to get there. I reposted to the mailing list Mike Bush's report that the bird was still there at 740, like me posting an hour later. So I'm not sure how timely that was, but maybe people on the mailing list wanted to know that. Chris Sandoval sent a message at 9:15. So Chris, as most of you know, is the director of the Coil Point Reserve and is in charge of the snowy plover recovery effort there. And I'm sure a lot of you have already seen her message, but basically pointing out like, this cluster of birders are impacting these young snowy plovers at the site. And she gave some suggestions and basically put out a plea for, if the bird is still there in the morning and there's a lot of birders, here are some methods we can use to try to minimize the impacts on the plover chicks. Adrian reposted that message, which again, Chris posted in Slack. He reposted it on the mailing list. I put a response in Slack, kind of thanking her for her input and noting that, when we were on site, we were cooperating with the docent, but agreeing that, you could see there were some plover chicks that were affected by the birders there. And that's a photo I took just after 5 o'clock as I was leaving. So that kind of shows you what the group there was doing. Okay, and that's it for the timeline. And we did not do very well in terms of time, but it was exciting to go through it all again. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So I go back to seeing more of you. Okay, so where are we at on the agenda? Timeline event. So what worked well? So just briefly, what do people think worked well about this incident? And I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to take a break and let one or more of you chime in with what you think worked well. So just go ahead and unmute and jump in there. I don't need to recognize you. We're a small enough group. I don't think we'll step on each other.
I think just the level of communication that was going on. It was a little fragmented, but people were communicating, and most people who wanted to got to see the bird, and that was the number one thing.
Yeah, I think probably we'd all agree with that, and I certainly do. Other positive things?
Well, it was obviously good how people like Glenn, certain people are connected to everything, and they pass the stuff around between the different communications. So that worked really well. I got the feeling there was plenty of people, like 10 people or more, who were ready to do that. So everything was always just a couple minutes behind.
I thought it was good that a lot of the detailed chatter stayed in Slack and did not clog up, the mailing list, because, people would have got like 50 emails, in a couple hours, and I don't think that would have been particularly useful. There's maybe people who were complaining that they felt they weren't getting all the information, but I think for the most part, they were getting the most important information in a very timely way.
I'd have to agree with that. I think the kind of like quick chatter was really nice to have in Slack, where we're kind of used to it. I did actually, now that we went through the timeline, I missed a couple of the SBCO birding emails. The way they get all linked up, they get buried, and it's hard to see, what's next, what was most recent. but the quickness of the Slack kind of helped. Like we skipped birding Rufufia and Gaviota because people had already reported that, so we just went straight up to Ocean Park. So I think that might have not been relevant to like an email listserv or something, but it was definitely quickly communicated in Slack.
Yeah, I was going to say that, one of the things I really think, again, reviewing all this over the weekend and ready for this, that I think did work well is that different subsets of the interested birders got to use the communications channels that they preferred to use. Like the people who were using Slack and like Slack were able to use Slack, and they could be very chatty and they could, do their Slack thing. The people using the mailing list, it didn't blow up with lots and lots of messages, and that was good. And people using the WhatsApp group, which is specifically for an event like this, I think they were using it very effectively, and it was certainly a big part of figuring stuff out. Some of the key pieces of information, surfaced and were coordinated through that group. So yeah, I would agree with that. Other good things before we move on to what we could do better.
So
I want everyone to have a chance
yeah.
to give.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a bizarre combination of good and bad responses to this event that happened, because on the one hand, enough people were sharing the information in enough places that I did get specific information of where the bird is, and I got to see it. But what I'd like to emphasize is the level of stress that I experienced in the course of that afternoon, or that. And by the way, I should preface it by saying that when the bird was found and seen in the morning, I said to myself, "Oh, those birds are only seen by one or two people, and then it flies away. I'm not going to drive up to Santa Barbara. It's not going to be seen again." That was it. That lady who saw it photographed it got lucky. Good for her, but that's it. I did not expect it to come back. And so I could have left LA around 1:30 and headed up there, or earlier if I really wanted to. And I thought, oh, no point. So then all of a sudden, like, information comes pouring in, and I could tell that there's things going on in the background. And that was very stressful, because I knew that there's all kinds of information floating around in specifics that's not being posted to CalBirds. I wasn't sure what, but there's this big unknown monster in the back of my brain about what's happening here. That's it for now.
Yeah, and I appreciate, a foreshadowing of the next segment of the agenda, but I'm glad that you limited it so we can finish up with the positive stuff. But that's a good point that we'll come back to. Any other, things people liked about what happened on the day? All right, going once, going twice. All right, let's move on. So what could have gone better? As I say, I do have some input from some people that I want to share, some stuff that they passed on to me to read. But before I get to that, let's go ahead and kind of open the floodgates. Like, I'd be really interested. I mean, everybody here, was participating on the day in some capacity, and I would really love to hear from people. If you were ruler of the universe and you could reconfigure our communications to make them ideal, what would you do? What do you think could have been done better here?
For me, the only failure on the day was when the bird was refound, the delay in getting that news out to the greater public. And so perhaps if somebody had volunteered or been anointed to watch that so that nobody assumed that somebody else was going to do it, that might have happened sooner. Other than that, I think it went quite well.
Are you talking about the 8-minute delay?
No, to get to SB co-birding was more like half an hour.
Yeah, 24 minutes, 3:11 to 3:35 was the biggest gap there that I saw.
And WhatsApp had it, though.
Within 2 or 3 minutes, yeah.
I'm not quite sure I thought WhatsApp is for this kind of thing.
Yeah, but not everybody's on WhatsApp. And based on the cross-posting that had happened earlier in the day, I think a lot of people realized that it would be important to get it on all the channels as soon as possible.
for this particular piece of information, like the bird being rediscovered at a known location.
Mhm.
Yeah. Other, again, things that could have gone better. Other folks have highlights of their thoughts. I mean, I know we thought a lot about this. I know you have more to say. Maybe it's like you got too much to say.
Well, one thing is that if anything could have been done in the way the communications are set up so that Eunice would have felt comfortable posting it immediately. I have that same problem. I'm too much of a beginning birder. I see some crazy bird. There's no freaking way I'm going to go on SBCO birding or anything and ask. I need to ask somebody that I know and trust to, gently tell me, no, that's just a normal bird. So if we could do something like that, then Eunice could have put something up at 9:30. That would have been the biggest savings of all.
Yeah. So John, is this the appropriate place for me to jump in here?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks, Steve. As a kind of a fellow kind of newer birder, that's exactly right. I think my only suggestion for that would be maybe from time to time a communication could be sent to the SBCO birding that would kind of say that something that would say something to newer birders, and basically just kind of encourage them, to, I mean, the thing is, it's a kind of a tough call, right? Because obviously we don't want newer birders sending a whole bunch of, newer birders are going to see things that aren't rare, but they don't know what they are.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we walk that fine line. I mean, I think it can be done with some careful thought about the messaging, but yeah, I mean, Steve, that's exactly the thing. I mean, I was trying to figure out what it was. I was trying to identify it rather than just having, confidence in myself. I thought it might be a rarity pretty early on. And so at that point, I should have just sent it in. So.
Yeah. I mean, Slack seems like the first place you might go if you're unsure. I mean, I can't imagine us being able to change SBCO birding in any way so that you and I felt comfortable putting some thing up there. But Slack, I could imagine doing something with Slack so that I could put just my bird of some thing and people go, yes, it's a Western gull, Steve,
Well, and one of the virtues of Slack that might not be obvious to the people who don't use it is that unlike the mailing list and unlike the WhatsApp group, you can delete your post. You can say something, someone can give you a reply, you can say, oh, okay, you just back away and delete it, and it never happened. It's much easier to edit things after the fact or delete things. And again, I think, obviously I'm a fan of it. I set it up and I administer it. I mean, I think it is a more lightweight act. It feels like a less consequential act to post something in Slack, and that can be helpful in a situation like this where, I mean, I have been there too. I have posted something to SBCO birding, especially earlier on in my birding career, that I came to regret. And those lessons hit home, and then you become less likely to post in the future. Okay, I do want to take a brief break, well, not a break, but I want to read some of these comments I got from folks because I think they were really interesting and deserve to be included. One thing I wanted to do is I did want to read the full message that Chris Sandoval sent to Slack that then got reposted to the mailing list. Again, she's the director of the Coal Oil Point Reserve. And, so that evening after the excitement had kind of tapered off, she wrote, "It was exciting to see so many birders at the reserve today. I ask for your help to manage the birder crowd at the beach tomorrow in case the gull is still there. Today, there were 2 broods of very young Western snowy plover chicks that could not walk to the wet sand by the ocean to feed because there was a barrier of birders between them and the ocean. The chicks can't move to another territory because the plover males from adjacent territories attack and possibly kill them. This is the peak of plover breeding season and 35 chicks are at the beach. We have a policy that the area between the ocean and the plover fence is for walking only. To reduce the impact of birders stationed by the plover fence, you could inform people about things they can do to help protect the plover chicks. Stay near the ocean, at least 40 feet from the plover fence. Stay as a tight group and don't spread along the beach. Take turns to have small groups at the beach. Make short visits to allow others to see the gull. If you see plover chicks coming close, back away and let them feed at the beach. Thank you. I really appreciate your help. Feel free to email me with your thoughts," and she gives her email address. So, Chris is not in the meeting, but yeah, I mean, I have volunteered as a snowy plover docent at the snowy plover breeding that happened in Carpinteria's beaches, and I can relate to exactly what she was saying. And I'll also acknowledge, like, I was there and I was seeing the snowy plover chick, 10 feet away from us, kind of staring at all these birders. And, I mean, I certainly complied, and all the birders there were complying with the docent who was there and asking them to kind of compress ourselves and back away from the fence. But even with all that being said, certainly with the benefit of hindsight and reading Chris's message, like, yeah, we were negatively impacting those plover chicks, the couple of plover chicks that happened to be right in that spot where we were all congregating.
I think John, I think we were just oblivious of the fact, though, that they had to get to the beach. If we'd known that information, I think we could have policed ourselves and moved to the left for a while and moved to the right for a while. I think we were just ignorant.
Well, and again, I really appreciated Chris's comment. And if the bird had stayed there, like, I can only imagine there would have been a bigger crush of birders the next day, and it would have been a real challenge. And that kind of brings up some of the things that some other folks have mentioned. I'm going to read the next message I got. Actually, I'm going to skip ahead to this one. So this message was sent to me by someone on Slack who is, a prominent local birder, but who asked that they couldn't participate in the meeting, but they asked that if I share their thoughts, I do so anonymously. So I've kind of edited these remarks to remove identifying information. Slack has been a great addition to SBA birding because it permits broad discussion of diverse topics to a limitless audience. The SBA Rare Bird Alert group on WhatsApp has complementary value. One, its sole purpose is notification about rare birds, so that in contrast to Slack, you know that when you get the sound you've assigned to WhatsApp, there's an important note worth immediate attention. And two, the membership is moderated/mediated by Jamie Chavez, I think, so that the postings are confined to locals, which gives SBA birders the option of deciding how to handle transmission of information beyond SBA if the bird is on private property or has other special issues. It is my impression that this latter point is overlooked or not understood or disregarded by new birders, people unacquainted with US private property laws, and people who think that birds/citizen science trumps practical considerations. Those of us who have been looking at birds for a long time understand that when out-of-towners charge in to get their rare bird, some of those people may misbehave in ways that impact future site access and/or bird health. Even if this risk is slight, bad behavior does happen, and the risk scales with the number of visitors. Because Slack is open to anyone, rare bird posts on Slack increase this risk. It is also going to cause some people to not post messages about rare birds on Slack for this very reason. I doubt any SBA birder would consider losing site access, disturbing birds, or missing out on rare birds to be a good outcome. Therefore, I think that the best combination of communication resources would be to discourage or prohibit rare bird reports on Slack and encourage or require the use of the SBA-focused WhatsApp group instead, and let the more experienced birders in the county, I would not include myself in that group, decide when and how to broadcast the information to a broader audience. This would be in accord with older means of communication and would promote values, restrictions, ethics of longtime birders that are ignored by the disruptor ethic of telling everyone everything every time. Hope you have a productive discussion. So thank you for putting up with that. I know it was long, but I thought this is very significant. I really want to share this input. And, I personally don't necessarily agree with every point there, but I do think it's, very sincere and well thought out and very deserving of consideration.
Was that anonymous?
Yes, that was the anonymous message. Okay, so other things that could have been done better, other feedback about, problems with how things work currently.
I think that message is a very important point, and it keeps coming up over and over in the last 2 years since I've been birding. This key point of how can you control access to things, because when you make a wider audience, there are some bad actors, some people who just don't follow the ethics of the bigger group. But what I have not seen is a good solution, like this solution that's proposed of using the old communications. That doesn't work too well, because we've seen the advantages of Slack in our group for chit chat about stuff and making a low barrier to entry for tracking this rare bird. So it would possibly be conceivable, though, to restrict Slack to the same audience that SBCO birding is restricted to. That seems reasonable to me.
So I do want to move on to the last item on the agenda, or the penultimate item on the agenda, which is like proposals for how to address these problems. But before I do that, I want to make sure that we've surfaced all the problems that people want to share. Like, are there downsides that we haven't talked about that people want to put in the list, or that maybe, you know, you have a slightly more nuanced version of that you want to share?
I just have a question. Is SBCO birding or the WhatsApp really restricted to membership? I'd be surprised.
Yeah, so my understanding is that SBCO birding is public, like in a read-only sense, anyone can read it. Jamie does have the ability to restrict who posts to it. Like, he can put people in, I'm not positive about this, check with him, but I believe you can put people in like must be moderated in order for their message to appear in the group. So you can control to some extent, you know, especially if you have a particular user that you think is problematic, you can control what gets posted there. But once it's posted, it's out there. You know, it's available to everyone. The WhatsApp group, I think you need to get a sign up link, and I believe Jamie is the one who has to supply that. And I do believe there is some degree of control that he exercises over that, but I don't know what it is. So that would be a good question. You know, as follow-up items, maybe I'll see if he can answer that or wants to answer that. But it is a much more limited group, which, as Steve was saying, I think is, you know, potentially a concern as well if we try to restrict it in that way to just using that channel.
John?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
One frustration I had during the search was I'm kind of low tech kind of guy. So I was just going with the WhatsApp, because whenever a message comes through, I get a buzz on my phone and I look at it. I wasn't using Slack because that would mean I'd have to get my phone out. I'd have to, you know, scroll through the messages and maybe not know where to look if things were under, you know, Tricky Bird ID.
Yeah.
So I got a little frustrated with that because, you know, I was trying to find information of where people were checking, and it turns out that people had already been discussing, you know, where they were going. So the fact that there were two places where that was going on was counterproductive.
Yeah, you know, I did have one more piece of input I wanted to share, and it actually makes very much a similar point. So this is something that Paul Lehman sent to me today. He was not able to be in the meeting, but he did want to, you know, share this. And I said, can I just read it? And he's like, yeah, that'd be fine. Paul wrote, and again, you all know who Paul Lehman is, but for those who are observing this who don't, Paul Lehman is one of the leading experts on bird distribution in North America and in Santa Barbara County in particular. He wrote, the points I'd like to make are that I am always concerned when bird information is overly fragmented, which seems to be somewhat the trend as of late in many, many regions of North America. The other problem is having these sorts of groups that are WhatsApp or GroupMe or Slack or whatever, that it becomes the one and only source for info, and so includes every single back and forth message, including a dozen messages about something like a palm warbler. For those of us living outside the county, we do not wish to be bombarded with that sort of volume of messages on our phone that don't deal with high-end rarities. Fine if you live local, and most every message can be of value, but a problem if one is farther afield. And thus, there's no option between either getting a high volume of messages that aren't relevant versus not hearing literally anything at all, at least not in a timely manner. And, you know, I just want to say I've heard a version of this concern, and it dates back to the discussions we had when we set up the Slack about a year ago. You know, there are people with a concern that I'm just looking at the message. There's a message posted. Oh yeah, Tom's phone is overheating. He will come back.
Yeah, he's leaving.
Oh, you're back. But just that there is a concern about fragmentation of the communications channels, and it is true. I mean, I think there is a harm that comes along with every additional communications channel. We've talked about it a lot. There's also a potential benefit. So it becomes this, you know, this balancing. Do the benefits outweigh the harms? And yeah, Steve, did you have something to say?
I see that there was another problem there that this reveals with Slack, and that is the fact that all that discussion was having in tricky bird ID, which is the wrong channel. Otherwise, if people could expect that, the chase for a bird, maybe if there's more traffic than we want to put on WhatsApp, it could go in a channel on Slack, but it would have to be in a channel everybody knows to go look at. So we could have done better. You as the moderator could have just stuck your nose into that discussion and said, hey, move this over here. That would have taken care of that.
Unfortunately, the moderator was jumping into his car and it was like driving up to try and find this
Or
gull.
somebody
But
else.
yes, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, Glenn, one of the many people who keeps the communication going between all the things. If we all know that that's what should happen, then we could do it next time.
So I think it's probably a good time to transition to the what do we want to do better next time. But before I do, just last call for anything, anyone who hasn't spoken yet and wants to get their perspective in. If it's already been said, that's fine. You don't need to repeat things. But if you've got your own take that's even a little different, this would be a good time to let us know. What do you think, could have happened better, or what was less than ideal about what did happen?
A very specific occurrence to me and my birding acquaintance, Allie, is when the bird was refound, we were outside of like cell range. We were checking Palama Beach. And so we had no idea for like almost an hour. And on the way out, driving back on Hawama Road, my phone exploded with, everyone finding it. I've been called maybe 30 times. But I didn't know the most exact, like up-to-date information because all the timestamps were really messed up from that. All the emails came in at the same time. And the place that I checked that did have the correct timestamps was Slack. That was saved. And so how I knew that the bird was still there and when it was exactly refound was by checking Slack. So that's my 2 cents.
You could scroll to the end of the message and say, okay, what's the latest info?
Yeah, exactly.
And again, so Slack, again, I've mentioned before, it has the ability to remove information. I mean, all the information is in one central place in Slack. So you can do things like maintain the timestamps. Whereas with distributed means like the mailing list or the WhatsApp group, the messages are going out. And if you're out of touch, maybe you don't get it for an hour and that shows up with a different timestamp.
Yeah.
I guess one last thing I will mention that I felt bad about personally, and it's not really a larger issue, it's just a personal issue, but my eBird app crashed while I was at Devereaux looking at the bird. So when I got back in my car to come home, I went to submit the eBird checklist and I didn't have the start time anymore. And I didn't have the track, which is fine. But I had to input manually, like, when did I start this checklist? And I goofed, like in my, I was literally like, I was starting to like pull out of the parking lot and I put in, I think I said like 1:30, which is completely wrong. It was much closer to 3:30 is when I got there to see the bird. Because again, the rediscovery didn't happen. It wasn't announced until 3:11. But this actually caused an unintended effect where I didn't notice this for a day. And there was a user who was, I think, understandably upset because they did not see the bird and came to the conclusion, based in part, I think, on my checklist, because I posted a photo of all the birders there watching the bird in the description part of my eBird checklist, that, here's this checklist that starts at 1:30 and goes for an hour and a half. And here's this group of like 20 birders watching the bird. And I didn't see anything on the mailing list until like 3:35. And this person formed the opinion that, a bunch of people saw this bird and were on this bird and didn't bother to let anyone else know, or didn't bother to let the mailing list know. So they were upset. And I feel bad that I contributed to that by, putting in a bogus start time on my eBird list. Anyway, that's.
And then there was a similar problem with somebody posting that they saw the bird the next day, but it was a day-old post. Same kind of thing.
People get excited, and eBird, eBird is all about this sort of like, we want to get all the data in, so we accept a certain, messiness in the data so we can have more of the data and then work on making it as good as we can. But it's messy, it's not really vetted and precise the way you would want if you had, a smaller group of people rigidly controlling who got to share the information and how. Okay, so let's segue then to the last item in the agenda, which was sort of, what could we do better? What are some recommended improvements? And again, I don't want to dominate this discussion. People have shared a few already, but let's go around and, give me your best shot at, what do you think we could do better? What are some things that we might try and learn from this so that the next time this happens, I'd love for it to happen every week, but whenever it is, unexpectedly, when we get another really good rarity, how can we deal with that effectively? And
Well,
anybody,
I
yeah,
would
Steve.
like to know from people who are the pros and are used to posting on WhatsApp and all, should we have been posting nothing at the pier, nothing at the wharf? Should all those messages have been going to WhatsApp?
I mean, the advantage.
I think they should have been. Yes, I think so, because it was good to know where people were checking. Just to rule places out from the list of places where we should be going.
And
So
if there
when
is
it's
a
rare
canonical,
bird- Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if there is a canonical place that everyone knows is the place to post that, then you don't need to you don't need to have 3 different people saying, oh, Lori is checking the harbor. Like, Lori is checking the harbor. It goes down there in one place and it's all there for people. It's there for people to see.
But I think, again, we get back to the problem that not everybody is on all the forms of communication,
Yeah.
So, from that point of view,
Well-
all the information should be on all the channels, but then I think that's too much information on too many channels.
But we're just saying that maybe the posting that had been on Slack should have been on WhatsApp. So it's possible that everybody who's on Slack is also on WhatsApp, in which case it would be okay to say, yes, this should be the rule. When it gets to be a rare bird chase, just move it all over to WhatsApp.
We could do that. I mean, that is something that, some people are advocating for. My anonymous respondent was advocating for that pretty much.
I would also really like that, just to have everything in one place. And can I have another suggestion?
Yes, please. I want all the suggestions that we can fit.
It was, and this was something that came up earlier. Maybe Eunice brought it up. Those birders who don't feel comfortable reporting a bird that they don't know if it's rare or not, or how rare it is, if they know what it is, for that to be kind of a safe place where they would feel safe going to put it out there. This is something like I know there's a Facebook page. It's called What's This Bird, I think, and people are always posting things there, new birders who want input from other people, and it seems like a very useful kind of place. A lot of major rarities have been found that way. It's quite astonishing. I'm not suggesting another place to go to put things, but maybe like a subset of what we're already doing, where folks would feel safe.
Okay, how about if we just rename Tricky Bird ID to be What's That Bird? This Tricky Bird ID gives me a little bit of a problem because I feel like it has to be sufficiently tricky before I'm supposed to put it there.
That's a very good point. We do actually have I'm in progress in Slack with a list of proposed channel renames and consolidations. One of them is to have an alerts and rarities channel where we would specifically send, real-time discussions like this if they're going to continue to happen in Slack. Another excellent one would be to rename Tricky Bird ID, because again, I didn't think about it when we originally named it, but this was one of the comments that I think that we reviewed, that Dave Compton, for whom this is not a Tricky Bird ID, this is a very clear, this gull is not ambiguous at all. This is a very clear, easy ID. Well, yeah, if that's what a swallow-tailed gull looks like. A lot of us don't.
So Eunice, what do you think? Would that work for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I guess I just think that to at some point to just kind of state that in some kind of a communication. I mean, I guess on Slack, that would state that and explicitly say, newer birders should feel comfortable posting to What's That Bird.
I could put a Western gull up there every week with a question about it.
An interesting aside that's relevant to this is, so there is the Santa Barbara Birders Slack channel organization. There's also one that is owned by the Goleta Coast Audubon Society. So that's a lot more younger, newer birders, people from UCSB specifically. We do have a What's That Bird channel in that, and it doesn't get used very often, but I think it does help a lot. You know, there's a lot of posted female red-winged blackbirds or a weird-looking red-tailed hawk, and I think that's really inclusive. So definitely, I'm in favor of kind of rebranding the Tricky Bird ID channel.
Okay, well, other input, other suggestions, ideas? Glenn, you look like you got something to share.
Well, this isn't really a suggestion, but a perspective where 2/3 of the year I'm in a place where there is no one that communicates anything, and many of the bird reports are from visitors that don't get posted until after they're back home. And so this is like we're like polishing the polish on the polish compared to what I'm used to dealing with, which is you get no information whatsoever. So overall, I mean, from my perspective, you know, sure, we can make a few improvements, but for the most part, that was pretty awesome.
I did want to share really quick. So I had jotted down some ideas, and most of them have already been shared. But you know, we do have a different channel in the Slack specifically for this case. We're going to do it. I am more mindful now of the potential need to maybe have a decision like, should we even be sharing this information? And, you know, this gets into like personal values and personal birding ethics. And, you know, like the anonymous person who I quoted, I have seen, as I've done more of this over time and seen more cases like this one, that, yeah, there are cases where it does make sense to not just share everything. You know, I happen to think that sometimes the arguments in favor of restricting that information get kind of mixed together with other sorts of reasons the user has, like, we don't want to lose access to a particular site, where technically we shouldn't be going there anyway, but as long as we do it in a low-key enough way, we can continue to do it. We report a rarity from there, we risk losing it. And, you know, that's on some level a legitimate concern, but it's also not quite the same thing as what it sometimes gets talked about if you're saying it's you know, we're trying to protect the birds, or we're trying to protect. I mean, yes, there is that. It's a bigger can of worms, and maybe we can't solve it here. And in this case, I think, you know, except for the snowy plover chick concern, this was really a pretty clean-cut case where, you know, you were in a public place going to see this bird. Although, as it turns out, when it was rediscovered, it was in a somewhat sensitive place, certainly for a big crowd of birders to show up there. So it's complicated. And I would just offer that for people who have a concern that Slack makes this problem worse, or the existence of the Santa Barbara birders Slack worsens this problem, I don't think the Santa Barbara birders Slack is, I mean, yes, on some level it does, but it also has the benefit that people feel more comfortable to share information there than they do on these other channels. And we have the ability to control that information after the fact. You know, if somebody shares something on Slack, like, I'll just use my own example. You know, if somebody posts, oh, gee, I heard this owl vocalizing at this interesting spot where I listened to the recording and it really sounds like it was a long-eared owl. Could this be a long-eared owl? This is one of the, you know, this is my formative experience of like why you shouldn't always just post SBCO birding. And posted a link to my eBird list with the recording, and like 2 minutes later had, you know, one of the more experienced birders in the county emailing me back and saying, number one, yes, that's what that is. And number two, we don't advertise that location because we don't want people disturbing those owls. We don't want people showing up and doing playback. And so, you know, and there was no way for me to pull it back. Whereas in Slack, something like that could be pulled back. You know, we could say, oh yeah, you know, we're going to delete that message, and the people who happen to be in Slack during whatever that interval was would have seen it, but no one else would going forward. I don't know. I think that's.
So are you leaning toward perhaps putting a restriction on, as we discussed, to Santa Barbara people on Slack? I mean, sounds okay to me.
Yeah, for myself, I would not go that far. Like, I'm holding out the possibility that in the event that a particular case rises to that level, and that there is some sort of agreement or some degree of agreement among some of the leading lights in the, you know, local birding community, that yeah, this is actually sensitive and we shouldn't share this. and it turned out that was being shared via Slack, like maybe because someone posted it without, and then that's how we found out about it. Yeah, I would be open to the idea that I would actually step in and talk to the user and say, I think we're going to take this down and here's why. But I also feel this point that the Slack resource should continue to exist and has benefits that outweigh the risks. But it's a larger community and I'm part of that community. So again, that was kind of the motivation to have this meeting, was to gather more voices. I know there are some people who have stronger negative views about the existence of the Slack who are not in this meeting, which is cuts both ways. I mean, that made it for a less contentious meeting, but maybe there is significant community sentiment that still needs to be considered and factored into whatever decisions we make going forward.
Well, at the risk of speaking for people where I don't really understand their viewpoint, I think we should consider the idea of restricting the audience in Slack. And one reason is we're trying to make it attractive to the newcomers so that we feel more comfortable with sticking out our crazy little thoughts on a forum like What's This Bird? And maybe that would be better supported if it was our community. I guess I don't see a lot of advantage to making Slack open outside of the community.
And when you say open outside of the community, you mean like posting a link to sign up for it when there's a rarity and like bringing in people out of the county?
Yeah, I guess I'm proposing making it a policy. No, you got to live in the Santa Barbara County for this, and toss in the other people and just saying it's just a thing. It's a community, because I don't see what value it provides. I mean, there will be gray area cases, and I think a few might be okay. But if it's somebody who just wants to be plugged into every single thing around to watch for the rare birds, they can run and see it. That's not necessarily what Slack is for.
Yeah, I think that may be optimizing for a problem we don't really have, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree. I mean, I shouldn't be speaking for it because I'm fine with it, but I know that there are people with negatives, so they can bring that argument, and that this would be a possible solution if it would address their concern.
Well, and people have made that argument, so I don't want to just throw it out there. I mean, I certainly do my best to keep an open mind on it going forward. All right, so we've hit the end of the allotted time in the agenda, and we're a little bit over, but not too bad. I don't want to stop this without one last round of, is there anything that anybody would like to share as we talk about this issue? I didn't really get to the action items. I mean, I will go over this meeting and write up a summary that I'll post on the webpage at birdwatchers.org. The archived video will be there for anyone who wants to review the whole thing. And I'll follow up in Slack, with suggestions for changes we might make going forward based on this input within the Slack community, where I feel like, okay, at least there we have a process. People can give their opinions there. If they don't like it, they can say, I don't like this. In terms of the larger community, I'm not sure that we in this meeting can really dictate policy. I'm not sure the people not in this meeting can dictate policy. The people who think they can dictate policy can't necessarily dictate policy. We're kind of a herd of cats, and an event like this kind of exposes that.
Well, like with the Chris Sandoval issue, I mean, that was a communication issue. If we'd just known, I think this is the same thing. If we start having a rare bird chase and somebody just says, okay, move it to WhatsApp, I think people will just do it. There won't be any problem.
Yeah.
So most of the things we're talking about are that sort.
Yeah.
So I think we should get rid of the rarities and alert channel on Slack and switch to WhatsApp and just try it out for the next one.
Well, and I'm happy to make that be, a discussion we have in the Slack community, so the people most affected by it can, if they want to argue for or against. And I know there are people who are not in this meeting who are in Slack who believe strongly the other way. So, let's have and in Slack we can have a messy discussion. It doesn't matter. And I'm on board with, to the extent we can craft a consensus, I'll be happy to implement that consensus. To the extent we're unable to reach consensus, I will, reluctantly make some sort of judgment and cut the baby in half and figure out what we're going to do. But we'll see where that goes on Slack.
I would have one more suggestion, which would be across all platforms, is an education campaign, both generally and specifically, like if there is a big rare bird report, directly attached to the message should be, don't trespass, don't do this, don't do that, be respectful, or if it's a sensitive species, don't report it, or, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we talked about tonight that a lot of people have probably never learned, and many of us have forgotten. So a round of education or building that sort of message into the structure of our channels would not be a bad thing.
If you prepared the rare bird protocol sheet, we could just plunk it in whenever the time is right.
Yeah.
Okay, I really appreciate everybody taking all their time on an evening like this to go over this. I think Eunice is still here. Thank you again, Eunice. You did a great service to the community, and very happy you had the courage to pull the trigger and post that information. And what a wonderful experience to see the bird. And again, I feel really bad for those who tried and didn't see it. There'll be another great rarity soonish, hopefully, or maybe not so soon, but eventually one will come around, and we'll do our best to get you on that bird too. All right. Well, I have my own chatter in the background. I got to go deal with my grandson. But thank you all again very much for joining and participating, and hope to see you at the next Great Rarity Chase. We're kind of coming into the part of the year where I run into you more often out in the field, so I'm looking forward to that.